I scratch built these hover sleds out of plastic card, and I started the project about 36 years ago, but I never quite finished it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to upgrade these and get them ready for a 21st century wargames table. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the little things we need to do to finish them off, plus we're going to make a few repairs where they've had some damage over the years. So let's look at the damage first. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to build some new windshields. You can see a very faint area here where there's some glue marks. Now, it did actually have acetate windshields fitted a long time ago, but these broke off during a game and never got replaced. Also, there were some antenna here which had little pennants on. And I don't think I'm going to replace these because these basically these broke off far too quickly, I seem to remember. One thing you'll notice at the front is the headlights. The headlights were never fitted. So what I want to do is I want to bring the model to life by fitting the headlights. Coupled with the windshield, it'll give, I think, a really good effect. One of the things I don't want to do is change the paintwork. Although I wasn't overly happy with the effect when I finished these over 30 years ago, I've actually grown quite attached to the fact that it's imperfect. So I'm going to keep it as it is. So whatever we do today, we must be very, very careful to maintain our original paintwork effect. What I might do, however, is add a tiny little bit of edge highlighting, because as you can see, there's a molded panel around the front here. That continues down the side, and it's almost impossible to see that and to see those other details now that we've got the camouflage markings on here. So I might try and edge highlight or dry brush some of those just to bring them to life. Right then, let's get started. First of all, I'm going to cut the windshields. So I've cut this piece of card, which I'm going to use as a template, where this is going to be folded. So we're going to score this. Be a bit quicker. Stick them to about there, up at that sort of angle. So we've got a piece of acetate here. Here's our template. We're just going to draw around it with the scalpel. I'm going to mark these points here where I'm going to score it. Let's put my marks at this side where I need to score it. And before I pick it up, I'm going to put the score lines in. So there we go, on screen number 1. Hard to see it on there, isn't it? So what I've done here is I've masked the very top edge of the windshield, because what I want to do is I want to give it a kind of a panel around the top. Now, the originals never had these. I think this is going to add quite a nice little touch. So, taking my Zandri dust and having masked it, okay, it's had another coat, and going to see if I can get the masking off now. Right, we've got a couple of smears on the screen now. That's where it didn't mask properly, and for some that's a disaster, and for me that's going to be a happy accident. I'm going to find a way to work that into the model. You can't let little things like this spoil your day. There we go. That will do. We'll see where we go next with those. Now you can see the top edge of the screen is delineated against the rest of the model, and that's the kind of effect I was going for. So I've just taken the worst off with a knife, and I seem to remember, and looking at this, you still can't really see the screen, the definition. The acetate is so clear, and the acetate, by the way, is just a piece of packaging from a box of chocolates or something. I didn't buy anything special here. This is just a recycled piece. So as I say, you can't really see the lower edge of the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a tiny bit of weathering. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Zandri dust, and from very, very far away, I'm just going to aim right in front of the screen here. And just give it a tiny blast. Like so. That's all it needs. And now what we'll see is that when that's on there, you can actually see the windscreen, which we couldn't back when this was originally built. So let me put that one to one side. I'll do the other one again. So this one was a little bit worse, but once we put our weathering on, this isn't going to be a problem. So remember, going to aim about here, and the overspray is going to create the effect on the screen. There we go. Bit more on that one. Still think that's going to look fine. You can see the effect, how that's going to look when it's stuck on. And now all of a sudden, those masking problems are no longer problems. They're just part of the weathering. Next, we're going to look at the headlights. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put some chrome silver inside the recesses, and then we're going to cover the actual headlight with a little bit of acetate again. So what I want to do is I want to mask the front of this, just so that I don't end up painting silver in the wrong place. I prefer using Tamiya chrome silver and some of their other metallics because they've got great opacity. So the mask wasn't necessarily to mask my actual paint line, it was just to give me a guide. Okay, there we go. So I've got some silver in the recesses. It's going to make the lights ping out a little bit. Now we just need to stick some acetate on there. So here's the headlights. They're very small and difficult to see, and they're hardly going to show up on the model. So I'm going to put a tiny bit of Zandri dust on these as well, just so they show up. So I'm going to put them down there. They're in this area just here. So I'm going to spray about here and just dust them with a tiny bit of paint. That's it. And one of them's gone, but I cut 5, so I'm okay. I'm going to use a tiny little bit of boss stick to stick the headlights on. That's the space it's going to go. I'm probably not going to be able to do this on camera because it's going to be too fiddly. Okay, you can see now we've got the lenses in. They are not perfect, but when you see this at a distance, it doesn't need to be perfect. You just need that glint of the headlights as the light passes over it. Now we're going to stick the screens on. I'm going to do this with boss stick as well. So what you've got to do when you're sticking something like this on is make sure that it's bent and conforming to the right shape, so that when you leave it, it's going to sit where it needs to sit. Because if you're sticking it on under stress and you let go of it, it's going to move. So we're just going to make sure this is folded to the right angle before we start trying to stick it on. This one's ready to go. So let's get this one on. So I'm going to put boss stick around the edge. Now this stuff dries clear, which is why we're using it to stick these clear pieces on. It dries clear and doesn't discolour the plastic. It's a very inert glue, and if you were to use polystyrene cement or super glue, you might find that it discolours the plastic a kind of a white colour, gives it a kind of a frosted, bloomed effect, which is not what you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this now for the glue to harden, and when it's dry we're going to see if we need to add any slight touches of colour just to hide the edges. So the danger here is use too much glue and you're going to get it everywhere. Use too little glue and in the first game you play, that screen's coming straight off. As soon as someone touches the model, it's going to just break. So fingers crossed we've reached the happy medium there. Let's do the other one. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. Let's stick it, hope for the best. Take a little bit of that off. You can see how my weathering at the bottom of the screen is going to hide some of the challenges with the glue. And there it is in place. Right, the screens are stuck. They're looking awesome. The headlights are stuck. They're looking good too. It's now time to do our antenna and put a tiny little pennant on. So I could do this with stretched sprue, and that would make it kind of like a whippy aerial, or I could make it with a little piece of wire like this, which makes it a little bit too thick. However, in my experience, as we had here, the whippy aerials are going to break off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this wire. I'm going to boss stick that in, and the reason I'm going to do that is because if the wire gets lent on by a player, it's just going to bend and it won't break. So I'm going to look at about how long I want that to be. So I'm just going to cut these off with a pair of pliers. Okay, that's about the right length, I think. Maybe a tiny bit shorter. I reckon about there. So something like that. I think that's about right. And then by putting a tiny little pennant on the end of it, it's going to stop the end from looking too thick, because generally something like this at scale size would want to be a lot thinner. So let me cut the second one of these first. I'll just cut it against that one for reference. There we go, we've got two of those now. And then we want some tiny little pennants, which I'm just going to cut out of a sheet of paper. So I'm going to just do something like that and something like then we'll just customize these a little bit. They're a little bit too long at the moment. Let's just trim it down like so. There we go. And once that is stuck on there, that's going to look great. So what we're going to do is we're just going to angle the edge slightly, like so, so that when it is stuck on at an angle, it's going to flow at the right angle. Let's get this one, and this one wants a slight angle on it as well, like so. There we go. Nice bold pennant. So what we will do is we will stick these on to the antenna, and then we're going to leave those to one side, and we're going to paint those before we stick them on the model. Right, let's see if we can stick this on with another little bit of boss stick. There it is. That's going to flop around a little bit, so I need to put that down to dry. We're going to do some low lighting with this snakebite leather. So all we're trying to do here, is pick out the lower edges of details on these panels. Now that I've got the low lights on, I want to put some trim around the edges of the headlights to help them stand out, and the bottom of the windshield to frame it a little bit better. So for that, I'm going to use a mixture of a bad and black air and deathcore drab air. Basically, I've had these sitting around for a couple of years, so they're not suitable for the airbrush anymore. They've gone too thick, but they're going to be ideal for the sort of thing I want to do here. So what I want is, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of this. I'm going to mix that together. I don't really like to put solid black or white on a model like this because it's going to stand out too much. So what we're doing is we're mixing the black with this additional drab colour, just to take the edge off it slightly. Okay, so here we go. Right, I'm going to get into this now. Now that we've edged the headlights, edge of the windscreen, we're going to put some edge highlighting on some of the panels now to help define them. And for that, I'm going to use Tamiya flat flesh. The reason being is I don't want this to be white and cold on the panel lines. I want it to be a warm colour, reflective of the rest of the camouflage and perhaps the terrain where they're going to be playing, which looks to me like it might be desert. I think a warm edge highlight is the right way to go. I'm going to use a very small brush for this one, and off we go. Right, I'm going to get into this now. Now that I've edge highlighted and put some low lights on, you can really see the difference. You can see how the edge highlighting defines the character of the vehicle, and the low lights, not a wash but just carefully painted in, help define those lower angles. Screen's been stuck back on again because it just broke off, and now we just need to finish off these little pennants, which are going to go in the back here like so. Add that little bit of drama to the whole thing. Okay, so I think I'm going to try these in this Tamiya XF23 light blue. I think light blue is going to be the right colour. I was thinking possibly red to match the decals we've got on the side here, but I'm just not sure. I think if I go blue, I think it's going to have the right feel, the right tone. I want them to be quite pale, quite tatted, quite faded, bearing in mind where these vehicles are operating. So here we go. Going to use some of this murky water, and I'm going to thin it right down. Here we go. And so when this is dry, I'm going to be able to bend it into the shape I need it to be. There, I think that is a perfect colour to go with the body colour of the Hovercraft. There, here's the other one. I know the pennant is a slightly different shape, but we don't care because they're finished. Let's put a bit of, you can see where the paint's pooling slightly where the glue is, and there I've put a tiny bit more paint on, and it's got slightly better saturation. Sometimes happens when you use Boss stick and you've got very thin paint. There we go. So that one's ready to go now as well. I think that's a great complementary colour to the rest of the Hovercraft. You know, with the Hovercraft being in these yellows and orangey browns, I think this blue pennant kind of sets it apart nicely. Okay, there we go. We need those to dry, and then we can consider this lot finished once these pennants are stuck in. Okay, we're looking good. It's time to stick these pennants in. So the reason I'm using Boss stick is because if it goes wrong at any point after it's been stuck, I'll be able to get this apart again and rebuild it. Whereas if I use something more permanent like Araldite, then it's never coming out of there, and I'll have to refit the entire flange and mounting point. So I'm going to stick it in, then I'm going to move the pennant into shape. So there we go. And now we're going to do this with the pennant, and there we go. We're sorted. We're ready to go. We're ready to cruise the deserts with that one. Let's get the other one. Same deal. Bit of Boss stick on there. A great deal of it coming out the tube here, so we'll use that. There it is. And in we go. The other thing about the Boss stick is it's going to dry clear. So any problems I get with there being too much glue, I'm not going to see it. Okay, so we want to just do something with this pennant now, like so. So the pennants are ever so slightly damp still. So what this is going to do, by twisting them into shape now, while they're slightly damp, they're going to dry in that shape. And so there it is. We've got our second pennant done. Right, let's get these on the board and let's see what they look like. I think they're going to look pretty cool. And there's our finished article. Still true to the spirit in which it was built 36 years ago. It's got the same paint. It's got the same decals. But the edge highlighting, the headlights, the low lighting, the windshield, and that pennant on the back have all breathed a new sign of life into it to get it ready for the tabletop. I'm so pleased with them, and I'm so pleased I was able to maintain that beauty that I created all those years ago. So for something that I started 36 years ago, I can finally say it's finished, because what we started with today, whilst it might have been partly finished and used in quite a few games, it was never truly brought to a conclusion, as I've managed to do in this session today. So Inquisitor Augustus and his little entourage now have a couple of completed anti-grav hovercraft to speed through the desert wastes. And let's remind ourselves what they look like in a little before and after shot. And there's our finished article. One of the things that I've done today is I've moved very quickly, and some of my edge highlighting, well, it's not as good as perhaps it should be. However, this is a rank and file hovercraft for my Spaceway Scum, and I've got a lot of other vehicles, a lot of other figures to paint. I haven't got time to spend forever on all of this, and this at a distance, I think you'll agree, it looks good enough. When you've got a couple side by side, they'll be more than adequate for the Wargames table. Overlook those tiny details, those finer points. Yes, if you're scale modelling for a diorama, you've got to get it right. But for the Wargames table, for something that's potentially going to get broken from time to time and repaired during the course of play, good is good enough. It doesn't have to be excellent. It doesn't have to be spot on. It doesn't have to be the best ever. If you keep that in your mind, you can paint a lot quicker. You can get a lot more done, and you can get to where you should be, which is on the Wargames table, having fun. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Any questions, please pop them in the comments below.